For my 66th birthday, my millionaire son gifted me a tiny cabin. Just 2 months earlier, he'd bought his mother-in-law a ranch 8 times bigger. His note simply said, "Sorry, Mom, I'm busy." I just smiled, but inside, I knew this wasn't the end. There was a deeper truth, and I was about to find it. This is my story. Like, share, and let me know where you are listening from. The heavy oak door of Daniel's mansion clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing the finality I felt in my heart. My 66th birthday, a milestone that should have been filled with warmth and family, felt instead like a cold, hollow ritual. There had been no party, no dinner, just a quick, almost clinical exchange in his vast, impersonal study. He'd barely looked up from his tablet, muttering a perfunctory, "Happy birthday, Mom," before handing me a large, expensive-looking envelope. Inside was a deed to a cabin, a small, remote structure nestled deep in the woods, appraised at exactly $30,000. $30,000 from Daniel, my only son. A man whose net worth could easily buy and sell entire neighborhoods. My hands trembled slightly, not from anger, but from a profound ache of disappointment that settled deep in my chest. Daniel, a millionaire, had given me a gift that felt like an afterthought, a quick solution to an inconvenient obligation. The sting was made sharper by the memory of just 2 months prior. That's when Daniel, with a beaming smile plastered across his face, had proudly announced his grand gesture for his mother-in-law, Carol. A sprawling, modern ranch house, nestled on 5 acres of prime land, boasting panoramic views and every luxury imaginable. A $200,000 ranch, a house 8 times the value of my cabin. He'd presented it to Carol during a lavish family gathering at his country club, replete with champagne toasts and tearful embraces. I had seen the photos on Sarah's social media, watched the video clips of Carol weeping with joy as Daniel, her beloved son-in-law, handed her the keys. It was a stark, brutal contrast that made my modest cabin feel less like a gift and more like a carefully calculated insult. A slap in the face delivered with polite indifference. Tucked inside the envelope with the deed was a small card. My name was scrawled on the front, in Daniel's hurried hand. I opened it, my heart bracing itself for some form of explanation, a glimmer of genuine affection. Instead, I found 3 sentences, devoid of any real sentiment. "Sorry, Mom. I'm busy. Hope you like it, Daniel." No phone call, no personal delivery, just a curt note confirming what I already knew. I was not a priority. I was simply another item on his overflowing to-do list, easily delegated and quickly dismissed. I sat in my old sedan, the engine off, the quiet interior a stark contrast to the buzzing city outside Daniel's gates. My gaze drifted to the imposing facade of his estate, a monument to his success, built on foundations I had painstakingly laid. I remembered the early years, the relentless grind of raising Daniel alone after his father passed, double shifts at the diner, the aching exhaustion that seeped into my bones, the gnawing anxiety of making ends meet. I'd taken out a second mortgage on our small house, poured every spare penny into his education, sacrificing my own dreams so he could chase his. I wanted him to have everything I never did. "Thank you, Mom," he'd said at his college graduation, his eyes shining with a promise of gratitude. A future where he'd always remember my sacrifices. He'd hugged me tight, proclaiming he'd make me proud, that he'd repay my unwavering faith. Where had that boy gone? When had the warmth in his eyes turned into the cold, calculating gaze of a man too busy for his own mother? The transformation had been gradual, insidious, like rust corroding a once sturdy beam. Back home in my small apartment, I found myself scrolling through Sarah's social media feed, a morbid habit I'd developed to catch glimpses of my son's life that he no longer shared directly with me. There they were, the picture-perfect family. Daniel, Sarah, and Carol, laughing over decadent meals in exotic locations. Photos of Carol draped in designer clothes, glittering jewelry, her face alight with genuine joy as Daniel gifted her a new luxury car, a surprise birthday trip to Europe. His captions gushed with affection, praising Carol's wisdom, her kindness, her unwavering support. Not a single mention of me, not a single photo that included me in their carefully curated tableau of domestic bliss. It was as if I simply didn't exist in his world. A phantom mother conveniently erased from the narrative. A bitter taste filled my mouth. Daniel always claimed his business was struggling, that times were tough when I'd subtly hinted at needing help with a leaky roof or a rising medical bill. Yet, for Carol, there were seemingly endless funds, and bottomless well of generosity. Was I truly so disposable? A relic of a past he preferred to forget, a burden he wished to offload. My intuition, honed over a lifetime of navigating hardships, screamed that something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. I drove to the cabin a few days later, a long, quiet journey through winding back roads. It was exactly as described. Small, rustic, but clean. The interior was functional, sparse, almost sterile. A tiny kitchen, a cramped living area, a single bedroom. It felt less like a gift and more like a carefully orchestrated exile. A consolation prize designed to keep me out of sight, out of mind. The isolation was immediate, profound. Trees pressed in on all sides, a thick green curtain separating me from the world, from Daniel's world. As I unpacked the few boxes I'd brought, a strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't just the disappointment, the hurt, or the feeling of being discarded. It was a creeping unease, a sense that this cabin, this remote location, was more than just a place to live. It felt like a stage, a setting for something yet to unfold. I stood by the small window, gazing out at the dense, silent forest, and a premonition settled in my bones. The answers, the truth about Daniel's drastic change, about his sudden, boundless generosity towards Carol, felt buried just outside my window, hidden beneath the rustling leaves and the quiet earth. I knew then that I wouldn't just be living here. I would be searching. The days at the cabin settled into a quiet, almost monastic rhythm. I spent my mornings sweeping the pine needles from the small porch, my afternoons reading tattered paperbacks by the window, and my evenings listening to the symphony of crickets and distant owls. It was peaceful, yes, but beneath the surface, a restless current stirred within me. The sense of unease from my arrival hadn't dissipated. Instead, it had deepened, a low hum beneath the quiet. This cabin, this gift, felt wrong. On the third day, as I attempted to inject some semblance of order into the sparse bedroom, I found myself systematically clearing out the small, built-in closet. It was a standard, unassuming space, lined with plain, light-colored wood paneling. I ran my hand along the back wall, feeling for any loose screws, any unevenness that might snag a hanging garment. That's when my fingers brushed against it. A panel, just slightly wider than the others, felt loose. Not just loose, but almost like it wasn't fully secured to the studs behind it. A flicker of curiosity, a small spark against the prevailing quietude of the cabin, ignited within me. I pressed harder, my thumb finding the exact spot where the wood gave way with a faint give. It wasn't a structural flaw. It felt deliberate. My heart began to quicken, a subtle flutter against my ribs. Using the edge of an old credit card I found in my purse, I carefully pried at the seam. With a soft click, the panel swung inward, revealing a hidden compartment carved into the wall cavity. It was dark inside, smelling faintly of old wood and forgotten secrets. My hand trembled as I reached in, feeling for anything stored within. My fingers brushed against cardboard. I pulled it out carefully, the small box surprisingly heavy. Dust motes danced in the sliver of light from the closet as I carried it to the window. The box was a simple, sturdy cardboard container, the kind used for storing old photographs or documents. But it was the writing on the lid that made my breath catch in my throat. Scrawled in familiar, elegant handwriting, faded with time, were the words, "For Eleanor, life insurance. Open only if something happens to me. Arthur." My late husband, Arthur. The clarity of his script, the simple instruction, hit me like a physical blow. 15 years since I'd lost him, since my world had tilted on its axis, leaving me a widow with a young son to raise. My hands, which had been steady moments before, now shook violently, rattling the box in my grasp. I remembered those first few weeks after Arthur's funeral with agonizing clarity. The haze of grief. The overwhelming sense of loss. Daniel, then a determined young man of 21, had stepped up, or so I believed. He'd handled everything, from the funeral arrangements to the stacks of paperwork. "Don't worry, Mom," he'd said, his voice reassuring, his arm around my shoulder. "I'll take care of all the financial stuff." Dad didn't have much in the way of life insurance, just a small policy through his work that covered the funeral costs. "But don't you worry. I'll make sure you're okay." I'd trusted him implicitly. He was my son, my protector, the only family I had left. I had clung to his words, to his unwavering support, believing he was shielding me from the harsh realities of my new, uncertain future. He'd never mentioned a substantial policy, never hinted at anything beyond a basic burial payout. And now, here it was, a box in Arthur's own hand, clearly marked. A lie. A betrayal that stretched back 15 years. Shrouded in the depths of my grief, with trembling fingers, I opened the box. Inside, carefully folded and preserved, was a thick stack of documents. The top one was undeniably a life insurance policy. My eyes scanned the bold lettering. Insured. Arthur Miller. Beneficiary. Eleanor Miller. And then, the number that made my head spin. $450,000. $450,000. It wasn't a small policy. It was a substantial sum, enough to have changed the entire trajectory of my life, enough to have spared me the double shifts, the second mortgage, the constant worry. Further delving into the box, I found a series of payment records, meticulously kept by Arthur. Every premium paid, every month accounted for, stretching back decades. The policy was active, fully paid up, and undeniably valid. My mind reeled. How could Daniel have said there was no life insurance? How could he have been so wrong, or worse, so deliberately deceptive? And then, I found the most damning evidence of all. A sheaf of letters, crisp and official-looking, exchanged between the insurance company and a financial advisor by the name of Daniel Miller. The dates screamed at me. 3 weeks after Arthur's funeral. Just 3 weeks. While I was still navigating the raw, jagged edges of my bereavement, Daniel had been busy. The letters detailed the claim process. Daniel, presenting himself as my appointed financial advisor, had initiated the claim. There was an authorization form, supposedly signed by me, granting him full power to act on my behalf. My heart pounded with a terrible rhythm. It wasn't my signature. I remembered nothing of signing such a document. My hand, even then, was distinct, familiar. This was a crude imitation, a forgery. The correspondence clearly outlined that the payout, the entire $450,000, had been directed to an account Daniel had opened specifically for this purpose. The reason stated: beneficiary, Eleanor Miller, is currently experiencing severe emotional distress and is deemed temporarily unstable to manage such a substantial financial transaction. Her appointed advisor, Daniel Miller, will oversee the funds on her behalf. The words burned into my vision. Too emotionally unstable. He had used my grief, my vulnerability, as a weapon against me. He had preyed on my trust, spun a web of lies, and then disappeared with my inheritance, all while pretending to be my pillar of strength. A flood of memories, previously muddled by sorrow, now came into horrifying focus. Daniel's constant presence during those dark months after Arthur's passing, his solicitous questions about my well-being, his gentle insistence that I rest, that I not trouble myself with financial matters. "I'll handle everything, Mom," he'd promised again and again, his voice filled with what I now realized was feigned concern. He'd assured me my small savings, combined with his burgeoning business, would be enough to keep me comfortable. All the while, he had been sitting on my fortune, using it to build his own empire, to fund his lavish lifestyle, to buy his mother-in-law a ranch, while he relegated me to a $30,000 shack. The anger that had been simmering for days finally erupted, a volcanic surge of fury that left me breathless. It wasn't just the money, it was the audacious, callous betrayal, the calculating manipulation of a son against his grieving mother. My son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for. The boy who had stolen my future. The $450,000 policy payout was only the beginning of the revelations hidden within Arthur's dusty box. Beneath the insurance documents and Daniel's forged authorization, I found a stack of impeccably organized statements and reports. With a sickening lurch, I realized these were investment statements, dating back 15 years, charting the meticulous growth of what was rightfully mine. My eyes fixated on the most recent statement, its numbers a brutal testament to Daniel's avarice. $450,000, carefully invested, had swelled over a decade and a half. The current balance stared back at me, a staggering figure. Over $800,000. $800,000, earned from my husband's foresight, intended for my security, and spirited away by my own son. The horror intensified as I scrutinized the account details. It was, indeed, a family trust. But the name prominently displayed at the top was not Eleanor Miller. It was Daniel Miller. He was the sole trustee, the administrator, the one with complete and utter control over every penny. My name was nowhere to be found, not even as a beneficiary. He hadn't just stolen the money. He had rebranded it, assimilated it into his own portfolio, making it virtually untraceable without the original documentation. The fraudulent authorization, the one with my crudely forged signature, now made terrifying sense. It hadn't just allowed him to claim the insurance. It had served as a de facto power of attorney, granting him legal authority over funds I hadn't even known existed. He had orchestrated a meticulous, long-term theft, building his empire on the foundation of my bereavement and his father's legacy. I spent hours poring over every document in the box, bank statements detailing the initial deposit, investment reports charting gains and losses, and, most chillingly, a series of communications between Daniel and a financial advisor. The letters and emails, written in Daniel's smooth, professional tone, painted a picture of me as an invalid. He described me as fragile, incapable of making sound financial decisions, and in need of constant protection and guidance. He emphasized my alleged emotional instability, reiterating his manufactured narrative to justify his complete control over the funds. He was not just stealing from me. He was systematically dismantling my autonomy, my very capacity to function as an independent adult. The weight of 15 years of hardship pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. All those years I had scraped by on my meager Social Security checks, supplementing them with odd jobs whenever my health allowed. The small savings Arthur and I had built together slowly dwindled, forcing me to live a life of careful economizing, constantly worrying about unexpected expenses. I remembered the times I'd timidly approached Daniel for help, perhaps for a new set of tires, or to cover a medical copay. He would always provide, but never without a subtle sigh, a furrowed brow, a tone that implied I was an inconvenience, a financial burden he grudgingly accepted. He had made me feel guilty for needing his help, all while sitting on nearly $1 million that was mine. Deep within the box, tucked beneath the financial reports, I discovered a final, deeply personal treasure. A handwritten letter from Arthur. It was dated just weeks before his death, his familiar script a heartbreaking echo from the past. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. My heart breaks to think of leaving you. But I wanted to ensure your future is secure. This life insurance policy, which I have kept active for decades, is for you and your peace of mind. It's for the travel we always talked about, for the comfortable retirement you deserve, for any dreams you still wish to chase. This money is yours by right. Use it wisely, live fully, and never let anyone tell you otherwise. Remember my love, and live without worry. Your loving Arthur." Tears streamed down my face, blurring the ink on the page. Not just tears of grief for Arthur, but tears of profound sorrow for myself, for the 15 lost years of dignity, of comfort, of freedom, the years I could have spent traveling, exploring, enjoying the fruits of Arthur's foresight. Instead, I had been worrying, struggling, and, worst of all, thanking my son for his generosity while he systematically robbed me blind. I remembered apologizing to Daniel, repeatedly, for being a burden. I recalled his cold acceptance of my apologies, his quiet nods, never once denying the implication. He had fostered that guilt, cultivated that sense of obligation. To keep me subservient. To keep me compliant. The cabin, my birthday gift, now revealed its true, insidious purpose. It wasn't a gesture of kindness. It was a form of management, a strategically placed warehouse for an inconvenient mother, far enough away to be out of sight, but close enough to be controlled. He wanted me contained, isolated, silenced. He wanted me to fade into the background, a docile old woman, accepting her meager lot. But that woman was gone. The Eleanor, who trusted blindly, who grieved silently, who accepted her son's narrative, was no more. The woman reading Arthur's letter, holding the undeniable proof of Daniel's betrayal, felt a different kind of strength ignite within her. A cold, hard resolve. I was not an invalid. I was not a burden. I was a woman who had been wronged, and I would not be controlled. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had to act. The next morning, driven by a cold, relentless fury, I drove straight to the nearest town. The local library, a quiet, unassuming brick building, became my sanctuary and my battlefield. I needed more than just the documents in Arthur's box. I needed digital evidence, irrefutable proof of Daniel's treachery. With the help of a patient librarian, I gained access to a public computer and began my painstaking research. Armed with Daniel's investment account numbers and names, I delved into online financial records and public property databases. What I uncovered sent fresh waves of nausea through me. Large, unexplained withdrawals from my family trust investment account precisely coincided with Daniel and Sarah's most significant purchases: the hefty down payment on their sprawling mansion, the gleaming, top-of-the-line luxury car Sarah proudly displayed on social media, the exorbitant tuition fees for their children's exclusive private school. Each luxurious acquisition, each step up their social ladder, was funded by my stolen future. My mind raced, remembering scraps of information Arthur had shared in the past. He was meticulous with his finances, always setting up backup systems. I remembered him mentioning forwarding important financial statements to an old, rarely used email address of his, a sort of digital dead drop in case of emergency. A long shot, but worth trying. After several attempts, I managed to log into one of Arthur's archaic email accounts, and there they were, forwarded financial statements, exactly as I'd hoped, but nestled among them, tucked away in the deepest recesses of the inbox, were something far more devastating. A string of emails between Daniel and Sarah, spanning years, discussing me. I opened the first one, my fingers trembling on the mouse. It was from Sarah, dated 5 years ago. "Your mother called again asking for help with her electric bill," it read. "How much longer do we have to keep up this charade? She's so needy, and honestly kind of pathetic. I swear, her calls just drain me." My blood ran cold. Pathetic. Needy. The words stung with a venomous cruelty that went beyond mere financial deceit. They were dissecting my character, my very being, with a surgeon's cold precision. Daniel's response followed quickly, laced with a calculating pragmatism that horrified me. "If she ever finds out about the insurance money, we're screwed," he wrote. "We can't risk it. I'll send her $200 and tell her it's all I can manage right now. She'll feel guilty for asking for more, and that usually keeps her quiet for a while." The calculated manipulation, the deliberate fostering of my guilt, the meager crumbs he tossed my way while feasting on my fortune, it was all laid bare. The pain of the betrayal deepened, morphing into a potent, burning anger. Another email exchange, more recent, caught my eye. It was from Sarah to Daniel, shortly after my granddaughter Lily's birthday. "I threw away that awful birthday card your mother sent Lily," Sarah wrote. "Honestly, $20? What's the point? I don't want the children thinking poverty is normal, or that their grandmother is some sort of charity case." A sharp gasp escaped my lips. My modest, heartfelt birthday cards, a small gesture of love to my grandchildren, were being intercepted, discarded, deemed an embarrassment. They weren't just stealing my money. They were actively erasing me from my grandchildren's lives, painting me as a figure of shame to protect their gilded facade. Then came the emails detailing Daniel's plans for my future, or rather, my managed disappearance. "We need to create more distance," he wrote to Sarah. "The cabin was a good start. It gets her out of our immediate area, makes us look generous, and it's evidence we could use against her later if she ever tries to cause trouble. Maybe we can limit visits to holidays only, and even then, keep them brief and supervised." Supervised. They saw me as a problem to be managed, a loose end to be tied up. Sarah's response was chillingly direct. "Honestly, how much longer do we have to deal with this? She's what, 66? That insurance money should be ours anyway, for raising Daniel and being a good wife to Arthur. It's practically family assets already. Maybe her health will just decline." The casual cruelty of her words, the thinly veiled wish for my demise, sent shivers down my spine. They were plotting my complete removal, not just from their lives, but from existence itself, all to secure their ill-gotten gains. I saw their entire manufactured narrative unfold before me in those emails. They had fabricated stories of my deteriorating mental state, my early signs of dementia, all to justify their actions to themselves, to others, and perhaps even to the financial institutions they defrauded. My calls for help, born of genuine need, were twisted into neediness. My simple, loving Christmas gifts became manipulative attempts to gain sympathy. And then, the ultimate insult. Daniel's plan to move the remaining balance of the family trust into a generational trust, cutting me out entirely, claiming it was for the protection of family assets, his children's future, built on my past. The cabin, my birthday gift, was not just an exile. It was a calculated piece of their strategy. "It gets her out of our immediate area," he'd written, "makes us look generous to outsiders, and provides evidence we could use against her later." The generosity was a cloak for control, the isolation a weapon, and the gift itself a potential trap, a testament to my supposed inability to care for myself. My hands shook, but this time, it wasn't from sorrow or disappointment. It was from a searing, righteous anger that vibrated through every fiber of my being. Each email, each financial record, each cruel word was a piece of the puzzle, revealing the full, grotesque extent of their betrayal. I printed every single document, every incriminating email, the stack growing taller with each click of the mouse. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable. Daniel and Sarah had woven a tapestry of lies, greed, and callous disregard. And I, Eleanor Miller, was about to unravel it. If you're finding yourself as shocked and outraged as I was, then you're in the right place. Don't miss a single moment of this unfolding story. Please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you can follow every step of my journey to justice. The heavy stack of printed documents lay on my cabin's small kitchen table, a silent testament to betrayal. 15 years I had lived, believing I was grateful for the scraps my millionaire son occasionally tossed my way. 15 years of doctor appointments canceled due to cost, of driving a dilapidated car held together by hope and duct tape, of making peanut butter sandwiches for dinner while Daniel and Sarah dined on gourmet meals. And all the while, my grandchildren were being taught to see me as an embarrassment, a needy, pathetic figure to be avoided. The injustice was a living, breathing thing within me. My old flip phone, a relic of a simpler time, suddenly vibrated violently on the table. Daniel. The screen flashed 35 missed calls. For the first time in my life, I watched it ring, refusing to answer. The power of that refusal, after a lifetime of jumping at his beck and call, was exhilarating. The next morning, the phone screamed to life again. By the time I picked it up, Daniel had left 47 missed calls and 18 voicemails. His tone had shifted from initial annoyance, "Mom, are you okay? Why aren't you answering?" to a rising pitch of desperate panic. "Mom, you need to call me back. This isn't funny. What's going on?" The frantic edge in his voice told me everything. He knew I knew. A familiar luxury SUV, gleaming despite the dust of the rural road, crunched to a halt outside my cabin. Daniel and Sarah emerged, their faces etched with a carefully constructed distress. Daniel's usually impeccable suit was slightly rumpled, Sarah's perfect blonde hair a little disheveled. They looked like actors playing a part. And for the first time, I saw through their performance. I deliberately waited a full minute before opening the door, letting them stew in their manufactured anxiety. When I finally did, I met their gaze with a calm I didn't entirely feel but managed to project. "Mom, are you all right? We've been so worried," Daniel exclaimed, his voice a practiced blend of concern and exasperation. He took a step towards me, but I didn't budge. His eyes, however, darted past me, scanning the small living room, specifically lingering on the bedroom door, where he knew Arthur's box had been found. He was searching, desperately, for any sign of his secret. "I'm perfectly fine, Daniel," I replied, my voice steady. "Just enjoying my new place. I spent yesterday at the library, actually, learning some new things." Sarah scoffed, a brittle, dismissive sound. "The library? Mom, really, you should get a tablet. It's much easier for researching things." Her condescension was a familiar poison. "I prefer the tactile experience of paper, Sarah," I said, a slight, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. "Tell me, Daniel, what brings you all the way out here with such urgency? It's been weeks since you bothered to call, let alone visit." He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Mom, that's not fair. I've been incredibly busy." "But when you didn't answer my calls, busy, yes." "I'm familiar with that excuse," I interrupted. "Busy buying Carol a $200,000 ranch, perhaps?" Sarah's face hardened. "Honestly, Eleanor, you're being dramatic. Daniel has been incredibly generous with this cabin. $30,000 is a significant amount for someone like you." "Like me?" I challenged, my voice still even, but with an undercurrent of steel. "The same generosity he showed Carol with her $200,000 property? Funny how you choose to forget that detail." Daniel cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Mom, let's not get sidetracked. We're here because we're worried about you. You've been acting strangely." "Oh, have I?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Perhaps it's because I've found some interesting documents. The kind your father left for me. The kind you told me didn't exist." A microscopic glance passed between Daniel and Sarah, a flash of recognition and fear. It was a silent communication, a confirmation that their carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. They were in this together. Daniel, ever the master manipulator, quickly adopted a tone of weary patience. "Mom, we've talked about this. You were overwhelmed. You were grieving. You asked me to take care of all the financial stuff. You gave me power of attorney." "I remember nothing of the sort, Daniel." I cut him off, my voice sharp now. "And I certainly didn't sign any document that gave you power of attorney over money I wasn't even aware existed. Tell me, Daniel, where is that $450,000 now? The life insurance payout from your father's policy?" He took a step back, visibly paling. It's in a secure investment account, Mom. A family trust, just like we discussed. For your future, to keep it safe. I was just waiting for the right time to transition it back to you. When you were more stable." "Stable? You mean when I was dead?" I retorted, a mirthless laugh escaping my lips. "And what about the $800,000 it grew to? Is that also in a secure investment account? Or is that what paid for your mansion's down payment? Sarah's luxury car? Your children's private school tuition?" His face went utterly white. Sarah gasped, her carefully constructed mask slipping completely. "You old spy," she hissed, her eyes blazing with raw fury. "I am simply a mother who found the truth." I corrected her, my gaze unwavering. "Those were loans, Mom," Daniel stammered, his voice cracking. "Temporary loans. I always intended to repay them." I shook my head slowly. "No, Daniel. You never intended to repay a cent. You intended to keep it all, to let me live out my days in quiet obscurity, while you profited from my husband's legacy and my grief." Sarah, unable to contain her rage, stepped forward. "No one asked you to be a martyr, Eleanor. No one asked you to scrimp and save. You made your choices, and no one asked you to steal from me, Sarah." I countered. my voice rising slightly. My body rigid with resolve. No one asked you to conspire with my son to rob me of my dignity, my security, and my grandchildren's love. You're better off, Sarah shrieked, her face contorted. The money was earning interest. You would have just wasted it. Wasted it? I scoffed. I wasted 15 years worrying about medical bills, foregoing comforts, living on the edge of poverty while you flaunted your stolen wealth. I wasted 15 years believing my son loved me, when all he saw was a nuisance to be managed. Get out. Both of you. Get out of my house. Daniel, looking utterly defeated, tried one last plea. Mom, please, let's work this out as a family. We can fix this. I met his gaze, my eyes devoid of any lingering affection. We stopped being family, Daniel, the day you decided I was too stupid to handle my own husband's final gift to me. Now leave. They hesitated, then turned and walked back to their SUV. The engine roared to life, and they sped away in a cloud of dust, leaving me standing alone on the porch. The silence that followed was profound. But this time, it was not the silence of isolation or despair. It was the silence of freedom. The sun had barely begun to paint the forest with streaks of pale gold when I pulled into the parking lot of Evelyn Reed's law office. The sign, discreet and elegant, promised elder law and estate planning. Evelyn, a woman with kind eyes but a firm jaw, listened intently as I recounted the entire sordid tale. The stack of printed evidence spread across her polished desk. When I finished, a heavy silence settled in the room. Evelyn picked up a document, scrutinizing the forged signature. Eleanor, she began, her voice grave. Daniel's actions constitute a clear case of financial elder abuse, potentially criminal fraud, and definitely a breach of fiduciary duty. The signature on this power of attorney is highly likely forged, and even if it weren't, he clearly exceeded any authority he might have claimed. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. What are my options, Evelyn? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We have several avenues, she explained, gesturing to the papers. We can demand the immediate return of all funds, with interest compounded over 15 years. That would be a civil remedy. We could also pursue criminal charges for financial elder abuse and fraud. And there are civil remedies for damages, including emotional distress and punitive damages. Evelyn paused, her gaze softening. Eleanor, I have to be upfront with you. Pursuing legal action, especially criminal charges, will undoubtedly destroy your relationship with your son permanently. I met her gaze, a weary smile touching my lips. What relationship, Evelyn? The one where I apologize for existing while he steals my inheritance? The one where he gaslights me and keeps me isolated while he spends my money on himself and his new family? That relationship is already dead. He killed it. Evelyn nodded, her expression grim but resolute. Very well. Let's strategize. We spent the next 2 hours dissecting every piece of evidence, every email, every financial statement. Evelyn highlighted the systematic nature of Daniel's betrayal, the 15-year pattern of calculated abuse, the deliberate isolation, and the meticulous control he had exerted over my life. Then, she delivered a chilling realization. Eleanor, based on these records, it appears Daniel has been supporting his entire family, not with a struggling business, but primarily with your husband's life insurance policy. Your money became their primary income, the foundation of their lavish lifestyle. The full weight of this revelation was staggering. It wasn't just Daniel's greed. It was the very fabric of his family's existence built on my suffering. I understood then the implications of what I was about to do. Accounts frozen, assets potentially liquidated, their mansion, their luxury cars, their children, changing schools. Daniel's business, if it wasn't just a front, would likely collapse. But as Evelyn laid out the potential fallout, I felt no guilt, not a flicker. The old Eleanor, the one who would have crumbled under the weight of such emotional consequences, was gone, replaced by a woman who had endured too much, who had seen her love twisted into a weapon. Criminal charges for financial elder abuse carry significant penalties, Eleanor, Evelyn warned, her voice serious. They could lead to substantial fines and potentially significant prison time. Then file them, Evelyn, I stated, my voice firm, unwavering. File both criminal and civil charges. I want every penny back, with every last bit of interest. And I want justice. The next morning, the familiar crunch of tires on gravel announced visitors. This time, however, there were 2 vehicles. Daniel and Sarah were there, but they weren't alone. With them was a stern-faced man in a tailored suit, whom I recognized as George Evans, Daniel's attorney. And, to my astonishment, a woman in a crisp white lab coat, Dr. Olivia Hayes, a geriatric psychiatrist. The audaciousness of their move took my breath away. "Mom, please, let's just talk," Daniel pleaded, stepping forward, his face pale and etched with desperation. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding." Dr. Hayes, with a professionally sympathetic smile, approached me. "Mrs. Miller, Daniel and Sarah are very concerned about you. They feel you might be a little confused, perhaps experiencing some early cognitive issues." She held out a form. "We'd like to just do a quick evaluation, if you wouldn't mind." I looked at her, then at Daniel and Sarah, a cold fury rising within me. Confused? "Dr. Hayes, I assure you, I am clear-headed for the first time in 15 years. I ignored the form. George Evans, Daniel's attorney, stepped forward, his voice smooth and practiced. "Mrs. Miller, we understand this is a sensitive matter. We're prepared to negotiate. My clients are willing to return 60% of the original life insurance money, gradually, along with a modest monthly allowance. In exchange, you would sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree to drop all charges." 60% of the original amount? I scoffed. Ignoring the interest, ignoring 15 years of hardship, ignoring the fact that it's nearly $1 million now, Sarah erupted, her voice shrill. "You selfish, vindictive old woman. You'll destroy our family. You'll ruin your grandchildren's lives." "My grandchildren are learning a very important lesson," I countered, my voice steady. "They are learning that stealing has consequences, and I want my money back. All of it." Daniel, his desperation growing, stepped closer. "If you do this, Mom, you'll never see them again. You'll be cutting yourself off completely." "Daniel," I said, a bitter smile playing on my lips, "I haven't truly seen my grandchildren in years, thanks to you and Sarah. You've already cut me off. The only thing left to sever is the illusion of a relationship." I gestured towards the path. "Now, I believe our conversation is over. Get off my property. All of you." Dr. Hayes made another attempt to interject. "Mrs. Miller, your responses are quite agitated. Perhaps we should just discuss your mental state." "My mental state is none of your concern, doctor," I stated, cutting her off with a sharp glare. "Your concern should be the ethics of assisting in a transparent attempt to gaslight a victim of financial abuse." As they reluctantly retreated, Daniel's voice, strained and full of venom, carried back to me. "She's lost her mind. She's completely lost her mind." But as their vehicles disappeared down the dusty road, leaving me once again in the quiet solitude of the cabin, I knew the truth. For the first time in a very long time, I hadn't lost my mind. I had found it, and with it, a profound sense of freedom. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again, but this time it was Evelyn. Her voice, usually calm and composed, held a hint of amusement. "Well, Eleanor, Daniel's attorney, Mr. Evans, has called back. He's very eager to negotiate an amicable resolution." "And what's their offer this time?" I asked, a sense of cold anticipation settling over me. "They're willing to return 60% of the original life insurance money. Not the current value, mind you. And they'll cover your living expenses at the cabin. In exchange, you drop all charges and sign a non-disclosure agreement." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "So, they still want to control me. Even after being caught red-handed, they want me to live in that cabin, grateful for a fraction of what's mine, bound by silence, while they walk away with the lion's share and no consequences." "That's precisely their proposal," Evelyn confirmed. "Tell Mr. Evans that my terms are non-negotiable," I instructed, my voice firm. "I want 100% of the funds, with 15 years of compounded interest, and full damages for emotional distress and punitive damages. And most importantly, the criminal charges are absolutely non-negotiable." Evelyn chuckled. "He's not going to like that, Eleanor. He doesn't have to like it. He just has to deliver the message," I replied. "And then he has to watch his client face the music." A few minutes later, Evelyn called back. "They hung up on me," she reported, a genuine laugh in her voice now. "Seems they didn't appreciate the full extent of your demands. But don't worry, Eleanor. We're proceeding exactly as planned." I spent the rest of the day sitting on the porch of the cabin, the sun slowly dipping below the tree line. The calls came intermittently. Daniel, Sarah, even a few distant relatives I rarely spoke to, clearly recruited to pressure me, to make me feel guilty. I let them all go to voicemail. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of peace. I was no longer hiding, no longer ashamed, no longer living a lie. I was finally telling my truth, and the world was about to hear it. Tomorrow, Evelyn would file the paperwork. Tomorrow, Daniel and Sarah's comfortable, meticulously constructed life, built on deceit and stolen dreams, would begin to collapse like a house of cards. I thought of my grandchildren, of Lily, and her discarded $20 birthday card. A pang of sadness touched me, but it was quickly replaced by a conviction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about teaching them, indirectly, that actions have consequences. That stealing, especially from a loving grandmother, cannot go unpunished. 6 months later, life was gloriously, wonderfully different. I was in my new home. A comfortable ranch-style house nestled on the edge of a small, friendly town. The kitchen smelled of simmering herbs and garlic as I put the finishing touches on dinner. The harsh, biting cold of the cabin was a distant memory. My new friend, Brenda, a retired teacher with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, sat at my kitchen island, flipping through photos on her tablet. Martha, my delightful new neighbor, and her bright-eyed granddaughter, Clara, were helping set the dining table. "Look at this one, Eleanor," Brenda exclaimed, holding up the tablet. It was a photo of us, bundled in warm coats, standing on a windswept cliff, overlooking the wild Atlantic, the cliffs of Moher, in Ireland, a trip I had dreamed of since Arthur and I were young, a dream Daniel had dismissed as an unrealistic fantasy during one of my timid requests for help. Now, it was a cherished memory. Just then, the doorbell chimed. It was Evelyn Reed, my attorney, now a dear friend, carrying a decadent chocolate cake. "Just in time for dessert," she announced, her smile warm. As she placed the cake on the counter, my gaze drifted to a framed newspaper article hanging proudly on the wall. The headline, bold and triumphant, read, "Local woman recovers $1.2 million in landmark elder abuse case. Son pleads guilty." The criminal case had concluded just a month prior. Daniel had, indeed, pleaded guilty to financial elder abuse and fraud. He received a sentence of 2 years in county jail, followed by 5 years of probation, and was ordered to pay full restitution. The civil case had been resolved even earlier. A swift and decisive victory. I had recovered the original $450,000, the full 15 years of compounded interest, and additional damages for the emotional toll and punitive measures. The total sum was well over $1.2 million. Evelyn followed my gaze to the article. "It was quite the fight. But we did it, Eleanor." I turned to her, a genuine, unburdened smile on my face. "We certainly did, Evelyn. And you know what the best part is?" She looked at me expectantly. "I feel free," I said simply, the word echoing with the weight of years of quiet suffering and the exhilarating lightness of newfound liberation. Life, at 66, had finally become what it was always meant to be. I could afford my medications without calculating how many meals I'd have to skip. Doctor visits were no longer a source of dread, but a routine necessity. Fresh flowers adorned my kitchen counter, simply because I liked them. My reliable car, a sensible sedan, started every morning without a whimper, ready to take me to my art classes or my lively book club meetings. I was, at long last, living the life Arthur had intended for me. My comfortable ranch house, with its vibrant garden flourishing under my care, was a testament to a future reclaimed. Daniel was serving his sentence in county jail. I hadn't visited. Sarah, with cunning efficiency, had divorced him as soon as his fate was sealed, taking the children and what assets she could salvage to Carol's ranch. She had managed to retain some of their ill-gotten gains by claiming complete ignorance of Daniel's financial machinations. A claim that, despite the damning email evidence, the courts had partially allowed. The grandchildren were gone from my life, now Sarah's ammunition, her shields against the shame of their father's actions. I had, surprisingly, made peace with it. There was a quiet strength in letting go of what could not be. One sunny afternoon, Brenda, my friend from the art class, watched me prune a rosebush. Her brow furrowed. "Eleanor," she began, "do you ever feel an obligation to visit Daniel? He is your son, after all." I snipped a deadhead, the scent of fresh rose filling the air. The Daniel I raised, the kind boy who thanked me at his graduation, died somewhere along the way. Brenda, the man in that jail cell is a stranger to me. He made his choices, and I made mine. There's no obligation to maintain a relationship with someone who fundamentally betrayed my trust and stole my life. Martha, who had overheard, nodded sagely from her porch next door. "That's right, Eleanor. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. And you, my dear, are anything but weak." Their words, their unwavering support, were a balm to my soul. I no longer carried the burden of financial anxiety, nor the oppressive weight of Daniel's judgment. My days were filled with simple pleasures, laughter with friends, the joy of creating art, the camaraderie of shared stories in my book club. I had even taken down the old framed photos in my former apartment, the ones that had become a shrine to Daniel's fabricated accomplishments. In their place, my new walls held pictures of my travels with Brenda, snapshots of my blooming garden, and candid moments with my new, chosen family. Then, one Tuesday, an unexpected visitor pulled into my driveway. A modest car, not the luxury vehicles I was accustomed to seeing. A young woman emerged, her posture hesitant. She had Daniel's eyes, a faint echo of his youthful earnestness, but Sarah's distinct chin. Lily, my granddaughter. Now in her mid-20s, she wore simple jeans and a plain t-shirt, a stark contrast to the designer clothes Sarah had once paraded her in. Their comfortable life, it was clear, was well and truly over. "Grandma Eleanor?" she asked, her voice soft, uncertain. "Lily," I replied, my heart doing a strange flutter. I hadn't expected this. She fidgeted with the strap of her purse. "Mom told me what happened about Dad, and the money and everything. She said you were just being vindictive. But then, I saw the newspaper, and the court records." Her gaze met mine, raw and honest. "I didn't know about any of it, Grandma. About the insurance money, about how he really got everything." A wave of emotion washed over me, not anger, but a profound sadness for the innocence she had lost. "Your mother chose to tell you her version, Lily. I did my own research," Lily continued, her voice gaining a quiet strength. "I looked up everything. The articles, the public records, the emails. I think Dad lied to a lot of people for a very long time. I think maybe we were living a lie." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Grandma, for not knowing you, for what he did, for everything." I saw genuine remorse in her eyes, not just the rehearsed apology of a child, but the dawning realization of an adult confronting a painful truth. The bitterness I had carried for so long began to recede, replaced by a glimmer of hope. "Come inside, Lily," I said, my voice gentle. "Let's have some iced tea." We spent the afternoon talking. She told me about college, how she was working part-time to pay her way, about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. She asked about Arthur, about my life before Daniel's betrayal, about the true story of her family. I told her the truth, calmly, without malice, focusing on the facts and the pain, but also the recovery. When she finally stood to leave, A tentative smile graced her lips. "Thank you, Grandma," she said, hugging me tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on yourself." I watched her drive away, a faint echo of my younger self visible in her determined posture. The path forward for her would be difficult, but she was choosing honesty, choosing truth, and that, I realized, was a profound victory. I sat in my flourishing garden, the afternoon sun warming my face. My phone was silent, no frantic calls from Daniel's attorneys. My mailbox was free of unpayable bills. My calendar, once empty except for the occasional forced family gathering, was now full of activities I had chosen. Art classes, travel plans, lunch dates with new friends. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "Daniel's lawyer is asking, again, if you'll consider a meeting." Should I tell him yes? I typed a swift reply. Still no. Then, with a deep breath and a quiet sense of finality, I went into my phone contacts, scrolled to Daniel's name, and deleted it forever. Some relationships, I understood, simply could not be repaired. But others, new ones, could blossom. Rooted in honesty and mutual respect. At 66, I was not just recovering, I was thriving. I was exactly where I belonged, free, dignified, and finally living the life I deserved.